It was one of those nights where the moon hung low in the sky, casting its silver glow over the village of Okiti. The air was warm, thick with the smell of wet earth after a heavy afternoon rain. My grandmother, Mama Nia, used to tell me stories about the hollow in the forest just outside our village. It was a place no one dared to go after sunset. Widow's Hollow, they called it, and I'll tell you, the name alone sent a chill through the bones of every villager, old and young. Mama Nia said that the hollow was cursed, that the spirit of a widow still roamed there, lighting a lantern every full moon, searching for her lost husband. But what most didn't know was that the spirit wasn't angry. She was simply lonely, waiting for the man she loved to return. I didn't believe in spirits when I was younger, not really. But even so, I never ventured near that hollow after dark, like everyone else. It wasn't the curse I feared, it was the whispers. Some nights, I'd hear them, voices soft as a breeze drifting in from the trees. The kind of whispers that make your skin prickle, but when you turn around, there's no one there. This particular night, I was sitting outside my hut with my younger brother, Tunde. It was late, and we'd just finished the evening meal, pounded yam with soup made from bitter leaf and a handful of smoked fish. The crickets were singing, and the warm glow of our fire flickered like a dance. Tunde, who had recently turned 16, had been pestering me all evening to tell him more stories about the hollow. But I could see the curiosity in his eyes, and I knew he wasn't asking for stories anymore. He wanted to know the truth. "Do you think it's true, sister?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I frowned at him, my eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" "The lantern. The widow. Do you think it's real?" I looked into the night, the stars glowing faintly above us. I knew what he was thinking. Tunde was bold, always looking for adventure. But no one, not even the bravest among us, had ever gone close enough to the hollow to see the lantern. "Don't go looking for trouble, Tunde," I said, shaking my head. "There's a reason the villagers avoid that place." "But if it's just a lantern," Tunde pressed, "then what's the harm in seeing it for ourselves? The stories are just stories, right?" I didn't answer him immediately. In truth, part of me was nervous, but another part wanted to see it for myself. The spirit of the widow was something I'd always heard about in whispers. Perhaps it was only a tale spun to keep children away from the forest. But as the fire crackled between us, the thought of witnessing the lantern for myself stirred a strange curiosity in me too. That's when I made the mistake of saying something I'd regret. "All right, Tunde, let's go." His face lit up, but the excitement in his eyes quickly gave way to caution as he stood. "You're not serious?" "I am, but only for a little while. We'll go to the edge of the hollow. If we see the lantern, then we'll leave. And if not, well, we'll return with a good story to tell." Tunde grinned, excited by the adventure. We both grabbed our walking sticks and slipped into the shadows, the village's sounds growing distant behind us. The moon was nearly full, and the path to Widow's Hollow was faintly visible through the trees. The ground was damp from the rain, but the night air had a strange stillness to it, as if even the wind was holding its breath. We reached the edge of the hollow by the time the moon was at its peak, hanging like a giant eye in the sky. The trees loomed large, their branches twisting as if reaching out to grab us. I felt a sense of unease, but I tried to push it away. We had come this far, and I wasn't going to turn back now. "There," Tunde whispered suddenly, pointing into the distance. And sure enough, there was a soft glow, a lantern light, flickering in the trees like the light of a distant campfire. But there was no campfire. There was no one there. The light simply floated in the dark, moving slowly through the trees. I held my breath. It was exactly as the villagers had described. The lantern. The widow's spirit. As we approached, my heart pounded louder with each step. I could feel Tunde's hand on my arm, his grip tight, though he didn't speak. We weren't sure whether to get closer or turn back. The lantern's glow became stronger as we neared the clearing. And there, in the middle of the small open space, was a figure. A woman, dressed in white, with long black hair flowing behind her like the river's current. She didn't look at us. She didn't even acknowledge our presence. She simply walked in a slow circle, holding the lantern high, her face obscured in the shadow of the night. I looked at Tunde, who was frozen in place. His eyes were wide, his face pale. I couldn't move either. Part of me wanted to call out to her, to ask who she was, but something held me back, some ancient, unspoken understanding that this was not a moment to interrupt. The woman continued her ritual, and as I watched, I began to understand something. The widow wasn't waiting for someone who had died. She was waiting for something that would never come. Not because it couldn't, but because time had passed, and nothing would ever be the same again. I realized that the lantern wasn't just a light, it was a beacon, a guide to something deeper, perhaps to peace, or perhaps to acceptance. She wasn't searching for her husband, she was searching for herself. Tundi finally spoke, his voice trembling. "We should go." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We turned slowly, walking away from the hollow, the sound of our footsteps the only thing breaking the silence. When we returned to the village, we didn't tell anyone about what we had seen, but I could tell that something had shifted between Tunde and me. He no longer asked about the lantern, and when I thought back on that night, I realized that the widow wasn't the one who needed saving. It was the ones who still feared her that needed to find peace. From then on, I would sometimes go to the edge of the hollow and watch the lantern glow in the distance. And each time I felt the strange comfort that it wasn't just a story, but a reminder that sometimes the greatest journeys we take are the ones into the heart of our own fears.